Welcome to the Academy for Christian Thought. My name is Ron Choong, and with me is Professor Max Stackhouse, Professor Emeritus from Princeton Theological Seminary, Professor of Theological Ethics. And we have on iPhone Professor Ong from San Diego, teaching at Bethel Seminary. Welcome, guys. Now, the first question we have for Professor Stackhouse is, can you tell us a bit about globalization from your definition and context?
Well, I can. The usual definition is that it's an economic process that's uniting the world by capitalism on the rampage. This definition seemed to me to be inadequate, and it's part of my motivation for writing about it. It has to do with the fact that I do not think that Adam Smith and Karl Marx were correct when they saw most of civilization being caused by economic purposes. It seems to me that economic purposes and interests are always embedded in larger cultural and social frameworks, and in fact the cultural and social frameworks are always influenced by religious factors and religious convictions. And therefore I tried to explore what would happen if we began to look at globalization from that standpoint. And another dimension that is there is that I think that globalization involves a whole civilizational shift, that our identities are no longer tribal, no longer village-wide, no longer even national. We can't operate without electronic equipment such as you have on operating here, that can reach around the world in instantaneous time. And the information flow that we have, the things that we see on television, which indicates the technological changes that are involved in the globalization process. But globalization and economics, for that purpose, could not operate unless there were certain kinds of laws that ruled over the various countries that we operate in. And John Whitty, one of the scholars whom I greatly recognize and respect, legal scholar, talks about the fact that more international laws have been passed in the last 50 years than in the previous 5,000 years. So that there's a globalization of law as well as a globalization of technology and a globalization of concern about the world religions. And these things influence the possibilities and prospects of globalization. At least that's the starting point of my definition.
Okay, great. Andre, any comments on this?
I guess the question would be, how has Christianity shaped globalization?
Okay, great question. How has Christianity shaped globalization?
Well, obviously through the mission movement it's been involved in globalizing. It's been globalizing since the Great Commission was uttered by our Lord, and people have sent missionaries, and whenever you get a convinced church and it's active and so forth, you're going to get the mission impulse motivating people. But the indirect connections are also important for globalization, and that has to do with, let's take technology for instance. The doctrines of Christianity talk about the fact that we are to till the earth and shape the world and be involved in the transformation. We don't just let nature be, don't just let the world be, we change it. And in the early history of Christianity, they talked about the education of the young, and they wanted to train the people in the mechanical arts, what they called mechanical arts. The mechanical arts were what we call today technology. Well, actually, they were more technique rather than technology, because technology involves the scientific investigation of technological changes and the measuring of the results and the improvement, presumably, of the techniques by scientific methods. But nevertheless, the idea that it's all right to disrupt Mother Nature, and that the natural order is subject to manipulation, to change, to modulation, so that it can have its potential fulfilled to serve human civilization and to fulfill whatever new possibilities may be residual in the natural order. That idea was planted in the early history of Christianity and became part of the notion of education, and it influenced the West tremendously. For instance, China's culture and to a degree India's culture had really marvelous techniques. That seems to be a human quality, but they never developed modern technology. And that came about when they began to talk about the examination of technology by logical and theological norms. What's proper to remake, what's proper to repair, what's proper to repair in a fallen world, what can you change so that it's not inhibited and blocked and become demonic in its impact on humankind. Cure diseases, for example. The medical implications were enormous, and Christians very early began to build the first hospitals in the West and develop the idea of ministry of health, and also began to develop technology in the monasteries, the monastic movement. They had the blessing of the tools. The tools that you use and the tools that you make are technological instruments. You have to be responsible under God for the kind of technology you use and build. So I'm just using these examples, the technological, the medical, and the idea that philosophy of nature are all deeply influenced by this impulse to use technology. And you could not have the development of globalization if you did not have an approval of the technological possibilities.
Now, as a theologian, how do you account for the disparity of wealth that arose from technological advances?
Well, the disparity of wealth is not new. When you think of the age of emperors and peasants in most cultures, the disparity of wealth was already present.
Right.
And sin is not specific to the modern or the ancient world. Sin is pretty much all over. People, if they have an opportunity to improve their well-being, might well take advantage of that opportunity.
Now, would a critic of globalization from a Christian context argue that Christians should not encourage technology that widens the gap between the rich and the poor?
Well, yes, they would if it widens the gap, but in fact, what happens is, and I document this in some of the things I've written, and I can't go into all the bibliography right now, but in fact, wherever you get the spread of Christianity, you get an improvement of the economic welfare of the poor, as well as the improvement of the rich. And sometimes the rich, building from a higher base, can go further than the people from the poor, but the poor have been increased in well-being also. And this is particularly true when you get to the age of modernization and the development of industrial society and the development of modern productivity. It has a multiplier effect that affects people from the lower classes. And people begin to move to the cities and begin to develop new opportunities for their own employment and the new motivations to work hard as soon as they're freed from the peasant and serf and slave existence.
Great. This is Professor Stackhouse on globalization. Thank you for joining us.